to find a way to very much, Convener. I'm delighted to move both Amendment 1 and Amendment 10 in my name. These amendments seek to enfranchise around 5,000 asylum seekers in Scotland who are here legally. They have a lawful right to live in Scotland. They are not illegal immigrants. They are part of our communities. They are our neighbours, our friends, our colleagues, and they make a valued contribution to Scotland. And I think if we were able to find a way to enfranchise these people, it would send a very clear message that those seeking refugee protection in Scotland are equally valued no matter where they are born. Now, the Scottish Government's own New Scots Refugee Integration Strategy establishes a really important principle of integration from day one, regardless of somebody's particular immigration status. And it's important that those that are seeking safety and peace in this country, that are attempting to rebuild their lives, people who are accessing services such as education and healthcare, these people are part of our community. They're not others, they're not illegal immigrants, and they should absolutely be integrated. And part of that integration is about ensuring that they are enfranchised and have the vote. In the words of one Glasgow refugee, granting refugees full political rights will help overturn stereotypes of migrants and asylum seekers as simply victims in need of help. In many ways, asylum seekers have got more evidence of that than you or me do, Convener, because when they come to this country, they're not allowed to work. They're therefore largely dependent on the state. The Home Office has a duty then to provide accommodation for them, dispersal accommodation. So they are then registered at that dispersal accommodation. They are registered at that address. It's a proven place of residence, which they will be there during the period in which they are claiming asylum. So they are verified, and that should in many ways make the work of electoral registration officers more simple in terms of verifying these people. So I would perhaps leave it there, Convener, but perhaps finally say that I do believe, as I believe the Cabinet Secretary believes as well, that everybody who makes a home in Scotland should have a say in the way that our country is run, and we need to find a way through this to give asylum seekers that important enfranchisement and vote.
So, do we have any other member from the committee? Yes, Neil Finlay, please.
Just very briefly, I would endorse a great deal of what Mark has said. I think, those who make Scotland their home have the right to have a say in how the country is run. I've also had discussions with the Refugee Council, and I'm reassured that the practical issues that were flagged up by the government at this stage one in the bill and through our discussions in committee can be overcome. People who are in the asylum system have plenty of identification. Indeed, they must have it to satisfy the Home Office. So I think those issues that relate to identity other than a national insurance number can be overcome, and I think we can make that decision here in this Parliament in Scotland with no influence from anyone else.
Cabinet Secretary, to hear your position here, because it doesn't appear to have moved on since November last year. I would ask you, and you can intervene on me if you like, if you have actually spoken to the electoral registration officers, you or your team, in the last couple of months.
Yes.
You have, right? Okay. So I spoke to them on Monday this week, and I think it's fair to say that the electoral registration officers have been rather busy during the month of December. They haven't actually met to review their position on the enfranchisement of asylum seekers, and I understand that they will be meeting at the end of this month. However, what I can take from the meeting that I had with Pete Wildman is that there is understandably a lack of detailed knowledge about the way that the asylum system works, about the forms of verification that asylum seekers have, both as to their identity and to their residency. And I'm confident that by furnishing them with more information as to how the asylum system works and how people moved, in a second, please, in a second, that those concerns can be resolved. Residence issue about people moving around. Asylum seekers are often in the system for years. They are in dispersal accommodation. Students in our society move around from semester to semester, from term to term, from month to month. I'm sure it would be easier for the registration officers if they didn't have to register students as well. But register students because they have an important role in our society. So at the moment, the bill creates unequal candidacy rights for foreign nationals. If there is a citizen who arrives from the EEA or European Union, they're able to stand for election pretty much on the day of their arrival. However, those that others require indefinite leave in their immigration status before they can then stand for election. And in that way, it will exclude some people who've applied for indefinite leave to remain and have been on a process of renewal for many years. There are some people in our communities who've been here for over a decade who do not yet have indefinite leave. Immigration status obviously is a complicating factor in terms of an individual's ability to take office and to hold office and to be remunerated for that work. But it shouldn't be a factor which removes their right to candidacy. In fact, we look at local authorities. Every single year we have by-elections that are caused by members standing down for a variety of reasons. Ill health, changing personal circumstances, work-related circumstances. People come in and out of politics for a range of reasons. However, they're not barred from standing from election because of their health status or employment status or any other reasons. If they're eligible to stand, they stand. Asylum seekers, and in particular, asylum seekers currently have no automatic right to work. This is something which can be waived. The ban on working can be waived by the Home Office. There is guidance that exists in relation to that. And I guess I'd be interested to know from the Cabinet Secretary about whether the Scottish Government have discussed with the Home Office the issue of asylum seekers in paid work, and whether the guidance can be changed to allow asylum seekers to work and to be remunerated in certain positions, including elected office. Of course, asylum seekers can undertake voluntary work. So in theory, an asylum seeker could stand, they could be elected to office, and they could conduct their duties on a voluntary capacity, only claiming expenses. That would create some equity issues in comparison to other elected members, but in theory would be a way forward. I think the committee had an excellent briefing session. We met a number of asylum seekers. I made the point at the time that I felt many of these individuals are highly valued by their communities and make excellent elected representatives. I would willingly vote for a number of them. There are issues around immigration status, but not in relation to candidacy, only in relation to the rights of these individuals to actually undertake paid work in this country. And again, I recognise there's a discussion to be had there with the Home Office, and I'd be interested to hear from the Scottish Government about how hard they are pushing at that door.
As there would be a disbarring effect here, because the person would no longer be able to complete their term because they essentially were no longer eligible to be here. So there is a difference in there. I'm quite willing, in the light of the debate today, to approach the Home Office, and my officials will be willing to do so. I have to say I have very little confidence that they will respond in a positive way. I have been dealing with migration issues through the Brexit process for the last 3.5 years. There are lots of brick walls, but that brick wall is particularly dense on migration from a UK government that has an obsession with migration. I think that extending rights to those with pre-settled status would be a logical extension, and therefore I'm seeking to find a way at stage 3 in which we can do that. So I think it is possible to have the conversation. I don't hold out, and just being very realistic here, I don't hold out much hope that the Home Office will change its position, but I am willing for my officials to go and have that conversation and to see if we can change that. If we can, then I think we could see whether an amendment at stage 3 was possible. And certainly I commit myself to an amendment at stage 3 if we can find a way to, and I hope we can, to deal with pre-settled status. So that is moving towards the position that Mr Ruskell has. Let's see whether we can complete that move if possible. And it would be helpful, therefore, if it wasn't moved, and we can try and return to this at stage 3.
It's at Scottish parliamentary elections and local government elections in Scotland. So therefore we call Amendment 3 in the name of Mark Ruskell in a group of its own, and Mark Ruskell to move and speak to Amendment 3, please. Thank you.
Right, thanks very much, Convener. I think one of the most positive changes that we've seen in our democratic franchise in recent years has been the ability for 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. And certainly, you know, a scene that really moved me actually was during the 2014 referendum, seeing you know, whole class loads of high school students coming down to the local polling centre to vote in that referendum and subsequent elections. And, you know, it's incredible scenes. And I think if we look at some of the young people who are leading our society globally at the moment, people like Greta Thunberg, you know, they're showing incredible leadership. And it does beg the question, if these people can vote, if these young people are enfranchised, why should they also not be able to stand for election, either to the Scottish Parliament or to local government? I believe that fundamentally that candidacy rights should match voting rights, and that's why I'm moving this amendment. I think this is a potentially quite a big change to introduce candidacy rights to 16 and 17-year-olds. I realise that there are a lot of issues that perhaps need to be considered and consulted on. It would be quite a big change, and I'm not sure if perhaps we're quite ready in Scotland to consider a proposal at this point to actually deliver those rights in this bill. But I do think we need to initiate a process here and a discussion, and that's why I felt it was perhaps appropriate to put in place a provision in this bill to allow ministers to bring forward regulations at the right time, and to put that through to ensure a super affirmative procedure, so it's given adequate consideration in Parliament, that there's a long period for Parliament to consider any potential change in those candidacy rights of 120 days. So it's a belt and braces approach, and it's not about saying today is the moment where we give 17-year-olds or 16-year-olds the right to stand in council elections. But I think we need to consider the issues here, and I think the committee's already had some evidence coming from members of the Youth Scottish Parliament who've taken a decision that they think this would be a responsibility which young people would be prepared to take on. And there's a growing debate on this, and I think, you know, the way forward would be to establish the power for ministers to make regulations in the future through this bill, and to see what transpires in the years to come. Yeah, thanks, Convener.